All right, what is up, guys? So I am going to kind of let you listen in on my on this interview between Good Morning America and Sam Bankman-Fried, and the questions that this interviewer asked was pretty point blank and straightforward. The actual interview is actually 2 hours long, but I think a large part of that is cut out, and the highlights are in this video, so it's pretty short. But I think a lot of people want to find out and kind of identify like what Sam Bankman-Fried is thinking, right? Especially when it's asked hard questions. And I kind of, in a way, want to give him some credit for at this, especially this point of time, wanting to speak to the public about it. It's very very it's not an easy time for anybody, right? As an investor, we have been decimated by the bear market, and at the same time also, if you had your funds on any of the exchanges that have already gone down, BlockFi, Celsius, you had, of course, the initial Terra Luna whole ecosystem just collapsing, and you have funds that are on FTX, on Celsius. It has not been a fun time at all. And I think to have this interview, or at least Sam is coming up and wanting to speak up about what is happening, and I think he spoke on CBS as well, right? And it's kind of like trying to position himself, right? At least to have some kind of media presence, and maybe a prerequisite to a potential hearing in court. At least there's something out there, right, in public, or else it will be one person's word against another. And of course, obviously, a proper official court hearing is what everybody wants. I think there are investors that are now coming out and lashing out about how they lost their funds, and how this mismanagement and this mismanagement obviously is not acceptable by any means. Okay, guys. So the main context, if you're unfamiliar, is that there's two companies, right? Sam owns both of them, Alameda Research and FTX. And of course, FTX being the exchange and Alameda Research being the trading arm. And of course, these are separate entities, but under probably it's under the same group, if you want to put it that way. But whether or not is basically Sam owns both of them. And it's just one thing leading to another, where you have positions that were built up while trading, and then the bear market happened. The positions are obviously in a bad spot, and you need to cover those positions, especially if they are collateralized in some way. You need to take funds from somewhere to pay back the debt, right? So what happened was Alameda was in debt, and what happened was the funds from FTX, which were from people who were depositing, right? And customers don't need to trade, guys. Customers just wanted to have a place to store their crypto, and these deposits were used to cover the positions. Now, what I've also heard is that Alameda Research, having the funds from FTX, they were using those funds to pay off creditors. So it's very, very disheartening to know that, especially as an investor, right, that this has been happening. Because in the terms and conditions on FTX, they are not allowed to use the funds for any other. You're not supposed to withdraw it by any way. Only the customers who have deposited can withdraw, not FTX, right? And of course, along the way, FTX has done donations to to politicians, and at the same time for campaigns, at the same time marketing, so on and so forth. And obviously all this comes from either fundraising, right, from their existing fundraising rounds, or it could even potentially be used from the funds from the depositors. You never know, because right now it's a full-on investigation. And I think Sam basically in this particular interview wants to have his piece and wants to have his say. But anyway, let's get to it.
It's the first network interview with Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of the cryptocurrency exchange FTX. And George, we know that you traveled down to the Bahamas to speak with him.
In that penthouse that he said, and used to work with his former colleagues at FTX, now alone with his parents. And Robin, this was really something, a wild interview. Almost 2 hours we sat down. It felt at times like a therapy session. He took every tough question. He wanted to speak out about all the questions surrounding this collapse. Remember, about a month ago, he was worth about $20 billion. Now he says he's worth $100,000. He's under investigation by prosecutors and regulators, but he insists he did not commit fraud. Let's take a look. A lot of people look at you and see Bernie Madoff.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's who I am at all, but I understand why they're saying that. People lost money. And
if you're wondering who is Bernie Madoff, you kind of need to Google it because, this dude, right, actually ran a very large Ponzi, right? One of the biggest in history. And, a Ponzi is just very simple. It's basically investors funds coming into it. And then after that, you use those funds to pay off previous investors in a promise of a return, right? It's not like when you're running a proper fund where, you have a fact sheet and you actually take, and fund managers, licensed fund managers will take those funds, right, and invest them into companies, right? And that's how you generate a return. But in Bernie Madoff's case, after all the investigations, obviously it was just a clear-cut Ponzi because you are giving a very crazy return. I can't really remember exactly what was the return, but I think it was anywhere from 20 to 30%. It was very, very high. And because it was so high, being who he was, Bernie Madoff, had a reputation, right, on Wall Street that allowed him to build the fund to that size. And of course, naturally there are 1MDB, which is Joe Low, right? And of course, smaller cases like Envy, which was, I think, linked to a nickel trading. There are just many in history, right? So, but anyway, Sam Bankman-Fried is kind of being compared to it, but I think in his defense, he did build a business, but it's just that there was so much mismanagement, like literally poor risk management and mismanagement of funds. It's questionable whether you want to consider it fraud, because he's saying that, or at least in this interview, which you will come to hear, is that he's claiming that he does not have the intention of fraud. He was literally just trying to, I guess, fill up the gaps or the holes, but and blame it on poor mislabeling and all that. But anyway, let's just continue listening.
people lost a lot of money. And I mean, at the end of the day,
you think?
Look, there's a question of what happened and why, and who did what caused the meltdown. And I think that reads very differently, right? When you look at the classic Bernie Madoff story, there was no real business there. The whole thing, as I understand it, I think was just one big Ponzi scheme, right? FTX, that was a real business.
He was at the top of the cryptocurrency world. 30-year-old billionaire Sam Bankman-Fried.
You just need FTX.
It's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
I don't think so.
Super Bowl ads,
Yep.
naming stadiums, Steph Curry, Gisele Bündchen.
We did a lot of things to try to.
So guys, you just saw all those stars and also the I think the brand being plastered literally almost everywhere. Like, it was undeniable that it's undeniable that if you didn't know about FTX, you're not part of the in crowd. It was so difficult. It's like, come on, man. Like, you don't have to blame yourself if you used FTX. Okay, don't feel that you were punked or whatever. Really, just take it as it is. As just this is just a very bad situation. I mean, a company that just went under, right? But if you are a retail investor, I will never ever say that. Look, institutional investors invested in FTX. Okay, and we have serial entrepreneurs, billionaires investing in FTX. Okay, it's like, it's like Theranos, right? It's the same thing, right? And Theranos, you would say, they tried to build a business. They tried to build a blood analysis machine that was really small or whatever, and obviously that was all BS, right? But FTX kind of like was all over the place. Like, don't ever blame yourself if you were using FTX, and with the full-on star power and celebrities all consistently saying how great FTX was, it's very difficult to avoid.
To try and bolster our reputation, to try and help our brand.
But in the early morning hours of November 11th, it all came to an end when FTX filed for bankruptcy and Bankman-Fried stepped down as CEO amid reports of FTX customer funds being used to pay Alameda Research creditors. This confirmed by former Alameda CEO Carolyn Ellison during an early November video meeting with employees. Alameda, the crypto trading firm also founded by Bankman-Fried. ABC News reached out to Carolyn Ellison for comment.
Okay, this is the problem with crypto, okay, guys. I mean, she looks like a kid, and this was always an issue for me, Like, you have all kinds of folks. I cannot like judge this based on her looks, but man, she looks like a freaking 13-14-year-old here. And this is like, I think, a CFO level individual in the company, right? And when I was listening to her talk, I'm like, oh my god, like, I have no idea what investors were thinking. At least I feel that I think maybe Gary and I think the other Indian dude, right? And of course Sam were the ones who kind of carried the whole team. But I mean, oh man, this part is the one that really boggles my mind. It really blows my mind, like, how come this individual can be the CFO of the company,
But has not heard back. One of the reasons FTX went bankrupt is because FTX deposits were used to pay Alameda's creditors. Carolyn Ellison said you knew about that. Is that true?
Best I can tell, Alameda did have a big position open on FTX. That position, I think, was very over collateralized a year ago. There was a total market collapse, and specifically a large correlated collapse in its assets over the last month, and to some extent over the last year, that threatened that position quite a bit. And I think that's, as best I understand, a lot of what happened there.
I am no cryptocurrency expert. I'm no finance expert, but I don't think you answered my question. I was asking, did you know that FTX deposits were used to pay off Alameda creditors?
Yeah, so whenever I was doing interviews, right, with companies, right, and I asked them very point blank, simple questions, and they would always kind of not beat around the bush, but they would try to answer it in a different way. This interviewer was just straight up, Larry King style. I asked you specifically this, and you didn't answer it. He was being very, very nice.
I don't know of FTX deposits being used to pay off Alameda creditors. Are you, which creditors are you referring to?
This is the part, right, that kind of like it got cut off. To me, I feel it got cut off because he was asking which creditors are you referring to. Obviously, the interviewer may or may not know. But in the first place, you're not supposed to even pay off whatever debt with FTX funds, right? And of course, Sam is saying that he does not know. And to me, I'm like thinking, nobody has that kind of high-level authority other than Sam Bankman-Fried, right? SBF would definitely have that authority and needs to know, because come on, man, if Alameda Research, right, has such a big hole that it needs to fill, or it owes creditors for whatever loans, you must understand that there's gonna be very heavy implications, and in the terms and conditions of FTX, as you cannot use deposit anyone who has deposited funds, you're not supposed to use the funds to do all this kind of stuff. It's very clear cut. Even when you're investing for equity, right? There's a specified amount. At least investors will have to ask, right? What are the funds being used for, right? And that's a totally different story altogether. But you are clearly depositors, right? Are not, or at least they did not know that their funds were being used to pay off Alameda Research creditors or even any debt. It should be separate.
Ellen Ellison said that you all knew that these funds were put into Alameda. They were the funds owned by your depositors.
So I can't speak for who knew what. A lot of the customers on FTX did have, borrows either, in dollars or Bitcoin or euros.
But as you know, the FTX terms of service tell the people who signed up, none of the digital assets in your account are the property of or shall be or may be loaned to FTX Trading. But you're saying that happened.
My understanding is a few things happen. The first is there is a margin trading facility on FTX by which users can lend out funds, by which other users borrow funds. And so there are explicit cases where there is, margin extended, where there is borrow lending.
If Alameda is borrowing the money that belongs to FTX depositors, that's a bright red line, isn't it?
There are a lot of cases where that's actually explicitly.
See? So it's like, what has that SBF, bro? He's asking a very simple question. Why were the funds from FTX, right, being used to pay off whatever that Alameda Research owes? It's totally different. The question is very clear cut. So that's why you already say it's a bright red line already. You cannot use the funds, right, from FTX to pay off anything that Alameda Research owes. Yes, internally, we all know if we trade crypto that yes, we can potentially lend out within FTX itself. But this is a totally different company. It's like, for example, you own a number of fast food chains, right? And then you have one fast food chain that is losing money, but you go and take the funds from maybe one of your fast food brands, another brand that is doing well, and then you kind of pay it off. Yes, of course, with kind of very poor and non-transparent accounting, you can do that, but in this case, you're not supposed to do it.
Part of the programs and that are
but
happening
not
in
here. Here it says that the digital assets may not be loaned to FTX Trading. They can't be loaned out.
This one is so... In a way, you gotta be... It's like... The SBF is like... He's like... cannot be loaned out. Like he's like a little kid trying to... like you're teaching the little kid how to read. And then you're like, okay, you have to reread the sentence again so that he knows that, oh, okay, this like, oh, cannot be loaned out. It's quite hilarious.
There existed a borrow lending facility on FTX. And I think that's probably covered, I don't remember exactly where, but somewhere else in the terms of service.
But they'd have to approve of that. They're saying they didn't approve of it here. They're saying you approved of it.
If you rewind to the beginning of FTX, where some customers were I think in line with sort of existing relationships that they've had, at least in some cases, wiring money straight to Alameda Research in order to trade on FTX.
So you do know, and you did know, that FTX deposits were being funneled to Alameda.
So I was vaguely aware that that was how some wires were being sent in the first place.
Didn't that set off alarm bells in your head?
So there are a lot of people who were involved in that process. And look, I really deeply wish that I had taken like a lot more responsibility for understanding what the details were of what was going on there. I knew that legal was involved. I knew that other groups at the company were involved, that there were agreements drafted up.
But you're ultimately responsible.
And ultimately, absolutely, I should have been on top of it.
At least he kind of says that I should be aware and I should be on top of it. Okay, this part, you know, I mean, as a CEO, definitely you have to take the hit. You can't blame it on anyone, even if you vaguely know the business operations. I think large transactions, especially when it comes to this, and also the depositing of funds that were going to Alameda in the first place were wrong. It should have gone. It should have gone to FTX, right? And I did notice that when they were doing any kind of wire, right, it would go to Alameda Research instead of FTX, which I found weird at that point. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, nobody cared too much because of, you know, the publicity and the hype around crypto. And, you know, and then at that point, you know, SBF, you know, was doing pretty well. He was very confident about the business, and at the same time, he was very pro regulation, you know, that kind of thing, you know. So yeah.
And I feel really, really bad and regretful that I wasn't, and a lot of people got hurt, and that's on me.
Here's what Mark Cuban has to say about that.
Yep.
He said, if I were him, I'd be afraid of going to jail for a long time.
At the end of the day, you know, it's not my call what happens, and the world will judge me as it will.
Are you worried about going to jail?
There are a lot of things that are worrying me right now. And, you know, as best as possible, I'm trying to focus on what I can do going forward to be helpful.
Okay, so this part, right? Okay, this part, right? If you notice his mannerism, okay, he's looking down most of the time, and I don't know whether you know, SBF, you know, whether is he like does he always answer interviews in such a manner? Because when you're actually thinking about something, you look up, but most of the time in this case he's looking down, right? And I would say that okay, for SBF, he knows for a fact that, okay, in order for him to actually go to jail, there would have to be a clear-cut misuse of funds on a personal level. Okay, that means if he actually took out funds, right, to kind of buy stuff on his own that were not, you know, for the intended purpose, this dude is going to jail for sure. Like if he took the funds, right, like literally for buying property, buying sports cars and all that, right, he's gonna be literally going to go to jail. He can be, because investors can press charges, because that's not what I lent you the money for, right? I invested in your company so that you can use the funds to further the development, for marketing, to focus on growth, getting a larger user base, hiring better talent, so on and so forth. But if, let's say, for example, right, he's found guilty of misappropriation of funds, right? That means he literally spent it on himself, or any of his family members or his friends, then definitely that's a misappropriation of funds. And you know, and of course, naturally, it can go on to, you know, funding illicit activities or illegal things. But I don't know whether he did that. But if he didn't, then he's actually not gonna go to jail. It's quite I feel this part is quite grey. But I feel that if he didn't, then, you know, he won't be going to jail. But wow, this one is
and, you know, let whatever, you know, regulatory and legal processes are happening play out as they will.
I do want to move on, but just...
He's very, very calm. As you can see, he's very, very calm about it. Like probably it already crossed his mind, but if his conscience is clear, you know, nothing will happen.
Just finally on
Yep.
this is really a yes or no question.
Yep.
Carolyn Ellison says you knew that FTX funds were being funneled to Alameda. Did you know that?
I knew that there is an open margin position there, and that involved.
I know, but that's not what I'm
$1
asking. If she...
Again, the interviewer asked this question for I think the second or the third time really. And you know, I mean, internally, I think everybody's throwing SBF under the bus at the moment. And you know, it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is at this point in time.
She's in court and you're in court and she's under oath and you're under oath, and you're asked, did you know that these funds were being funneled to Alameda? What is your answer?
I did not know that there is any improper use of customer funds.
You also took out a $1 billion loan. What was that for?
That was generally for reinvesting in the company. That was not for, consumption. To my knowledge, I have basically nothing left.
This is the make or break part, right? So liquidators will literally tear FTX apart, okay, and dissect it and really go through the freaking financials, the bank accounts, the whole blockchain transactions or whatever, and if let's say, for example, he claims that whatever he's saying now is tallies with whatever they discover, and there was no other misintentions, right? So everything will hold up. So his story better hold up.
Basically everything I had was invested in the business. I expect I'm gonna have nothing at the end of this. I think I had $100,000 left in my bank account last I checked, and I think I have, one credit card working with that right now.
Earlier this summer, you thought you had, what, 32 billion?
Probably 20, but a whole lot more than I do now.
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000.
$100,000 is still a lot, man. Literally, 100,000 you can restart your whole life, especially as a single man, no kids, right? Whatever he has left, right? And don't forget, as a private limited company, right? FTX is a private limited company. As a corporation, he can't be liable on a personal level, right? That's the thing. It's just about his own personal integrity. I personally feel that if he had set aside crypto somewhere, right, he still can function, and 100,000 is just on paper, right? I feel that he does have crypto somewhere, but nobody knows and nobody can verify until all this has been cleaned out, and he'll still be part of the space to a certain extent. It's just a matter of reputation and loss of credibility, and who wants to still listen to your story.
Yeah, it's been a really humbling fall in a lot of ways.
How do you explain the failure? Was it inattention, arrogance?
It's a good question.
Was it unethical?
Some part of it was just literal distraction. I really should have spent some time each day taking a step back and saying, what are the most important things here, right? And how do I have oversight of those and make sure that I'm not losing track of those? And frankly, I did a pretty incomplete job at that. I spent a lot less time looking at assets and looking at balances and positions, because that's not where revenue came from. And so I wasn't seeing it as a core business driver. Obviously, it was a core risk, and that was a huge mistake of mine to not think more about that.
You said one of your great talents in a podcast was managing risk.
Yeah, this part, wow, the fact that Alameda Research has successfully fundraised so many times, and FTX has successfully fundraised so many times to kind of have enough. They definitely had more than enough to grow the business, and really weather through the bear market is such a shame in my opinion, right? And having more exchanges, to me, is always better than having a few, right? And you want to have the ability to have choices, especially in a competitive market. And to see Alameda go down, right, is also not something that it should be celebrated, but it's more of how can future companies, right, that intend to grow a business run it properly. And the truth is, I think I kind of met some of the tweets that actually regulators are not doing much for the space, right? They are just listening. They want to know what's happening, but they are not helping out. They are not helping out, and I guess it has to take a few miters, right, or scapegoats, whatever you want to call it, right, before they will take things seriously. And I think it's also another way of saying like, hey, you know what, we told you not to dabble in crypto, and this is what happens when we are not part of it, and I guess that's going to be the case until there's a way there's that framework in place to make sure that that people can safely use a company, that the funds will not be mismanaged the way it was. And of course, ultimately, it's all about the people behind it, because whatever it is, right, it's still a business, right? And people run a business. It's not like the whole thing is run by code or whatever. It's still run by people, and people have weaknesses, and people like SBF, he's still a human being. I'm not asking you to show, for you to show empathy is entirely up to you, or sympathy, whatever, is up to you. And obviously, if you're an investor, you're not in the right frame of mind to give a shit because you lost a ton of money. But I would say that, think of it as, if you were to run this business, right, how would you have done things differently? Would you not have taken the route that he did? Right? You would say that, when you have so much access to the funds, right? Sam, to me, right, is not about personal greed, but he's definitely into the power. He likes to be influential. It's not so much about making money, because he already achieved that. In terms of months before the collapse, right? He already achieved that status of being one of the youngest billionaires, right? But it's about the power, right? And what you do with that power is very, very important. So a lot of people fall into that category. It's not always just about buying a Lambo or having a large house or whatever. It's not about that. For Sam, he's more about the power, having that influence, and that's what Sam was after.
That's right, and
Well, it's obviously wrong.
well, I think that there's something maybe even deeper wrong there, which was I wasn't even trying. Like, I wasn't spending any time or effort trying to manage risk on FTX. And that obviously
That's a
was
stunning
mistake.
admission.
What?
That's a pretty stunning admission.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Like, what happened, and like if I had been spending an hour a day thinking about risk management on FTX, I don't think that would have happened. I think I stopped working as hard for a bit. Honestly, if I look back on myself, I think I got a little cocky, maybe more than a little bit. And I think part of me felt like we'd made it.
You see? So it is very normal to be slightly cocky. He's 30 years old. He finally achieved something that a lot of people only can dream of. And and only to have that all taken away. You see, you can see that he's very remorseful, right? He's very remorseful, and yet trying to be as collected as possible, trying to answer the question. So and it can happen to anybody. Like, I've been in this spot as well, where that I just want to prove to the world that I'm better. And he did that. To a certain extent, he did that. But of course, right now, everything just comes crashing down. He's definitely not gonna be having that reputation anymore, and it's gonna be a very tough time for him. But like I said, guys, you decide how you feel about it. Like I said, if you feel that this space, what does this space actually need? I think please feel free to comment below. And of course, if you felt that this video was entertaining, give it a like, and of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. I'll see you in the next live stream, guys, or at least I'll see you in the next video. Peace.